Ever feel like, you're stuck? Kind of like you're on a treadmill going through the motions, but not really getting anywhere.
It's a feeling that's pretty universal, I think. It's resonated across cultures and centuries, that's for sure.
And you know what's fascinating? Rumi, the 13th century poet and mystic, actually had a lot to say about this feeling.
Oh, absolutely. He did. And actually, what we're going to be diving into today comes from a really unique perspective. We're looking at translated conversations between two Iranian philosophers, Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani, exploring Rumi's work.
Right. It's like getting a glimpse into Rumi's wisdom, but through a very specific cultural lens. And one of the things they talk about is this Persian word, malal. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I have. It's often translated as that kind of existential boredom, but it's more than just feeling a little bit restless, you know? It's that deeper sense of emptiness, even when you're surrounded by things that should be bringing you joy.
Yeah, I get that. That's such a relatable feeling. I think we've all experienced that at some point. So how did Rumi view this malal? Was it something to be avoided?
Well, actually, Rumi saw Malal as a positive thing. He viewed it as a wake-up call, a sign that we're seeking fulfillment in the wrong places.
That's so interesting. I would have thought boredom would be the enemy of spiritual growth, not a catalyst for it.
It does seem a little bit counterintuitive, right? But think of it this way. Imagine someone who's constantly chasing external validation, always seeking the approval of others. What happens when that external source of happiness disappears?
They're left feeling empty and lost.
Exactly. And that's where Rumi's view of time comes in. He didn't see time as this fixed, linear thing. He believed our experience of time is directly tied to our internal state.
Oh, I see. So if someone is fixated on those fleeting things like external validation, their experience of time would be marked by this constant sense of lack, of chasing after something that's always just out of reach.
Precisely. But Rumi suggests that if we shift our focus inward to something timeless and unchanging, our experience of time transforms.
It's like breaking free from that treadmill of constantly seeking that external validation and stepping into a more expansive sense of being.
Exactly. And that's where the real growth begins. Rumi uses the example of the prophet Noah, who lived for centuries, to illustrate that even a long life is ultimately finite.
That reminds me of the image of trying to hold water in your hand. The harder you squeeze, the faster it slips away.
That's a powerful analogy, and it's one that Dr. Dinani uses to describe our relationship with time. Each moment is precious, but trying to grasp at it only makes it disappear faster.
So it's not about denying the limitations of time, but about recognizing that our time here is precious and choosing to use it wisely.
And Rumi believed that one of the best ways to use our time wisely is to engage in deep philosophical thinking. He saw thinking as a form of spiritual practice.
So it's not just about passively accepting what we're told, but about actively engaging with ideas, questioning our assumptions, and seeking deeper understanding.
Exactly. And Dr. Larijani points out that this kind of thinking can be challenging. It's much easier to just go through life on autopilot, accepting the status quo. But Rumi believed that the discomfort of thinking, of questioning, is actually what pushes us to grow.
It's like choosing the path of least resistance versus the path of most potential.
And Rumi was all about pushing ourselves to reach our full potential.
Okay, so we have this feeling of malal, this awareness of the limitations of time, and this call to engage in deep thought. But how do we actually break free from that feeling of being stuck, of just going through the motions?
That's where Rumi's concept of the inner voice comes in.
The inner voice. Tell me more about that.
Well, Dr. Larijani brings up a Rumi poem where he compares this inner voice to a high-flying falcon that sees this world as a place of sorrow, and this voice urges us to rise above the mundane, to seek a higher perspective.
It makes me think of the idea of conscience, that innate sense of right and wrong that many people experience, even if they can't quite explain it.
That's a great connection, and Rumi emphasizes that this voice comes from within, not from some external authority. It's about trusting our own inner compass.
And it reminds me of the difference between physical sight, or boin in Arabic, and inner vision, or a. We need both, just like we need both reason and intuition to truly escape that treadmill of existence.
That's a beautiful way to put it. We can't rely solely on logic or solely on feelings. We need that integrated perspective to navigate life's complexities.
But why does Rumi call this world a trap in the first place? What is it about our earthly existence that feels so confining?
Well, Dr. Larijani explains that we're bound by time, space, and our physical bodies. We can't just jump out of those limitations. We're playing by certain rules, whether we like it or not.
But it's not just about those external constraints, right? I get the sense from Dr. Dinani that our own thoughts, especially if they're rigid or unexamined, can trap us even more than those physical limitations.
Absolutely. He makes the point that if we blindly accept ideas without thinking for ourselves, our minds become slaves to those ideas.
It's like building a prison for our own minds.
Mm.
So it's not just about breaking free from external constraints, but also from the mental prisons we create for ourselves. And to do that, we need to wake up.
Right. And Rumi uses some pretty powerful imagery to jolt us awake. He quotes a Quranic verse. So learn a lesson, O you who have eyes.
59.2.
It's not just about seeing, but about understanding. It's about using our minds to go beyond the surface of things.
Exactly. Dr. Dinani explains that learning a lesson involves reflecting, critically examining our assumptions, and being willing to let go of beliefs that no longer serve us.
And Rumi warns against getting bogged down in just meeting our basic needs and desires. He compares that to being stuck in a mortar, endlessly grinding away at air and boastful claims. He does. And he connects this to another Quranic verse, where those fleeting worldly pursuits are compared to dry, useless husks.
It's like chasing after illusions, clinging to false hope without taking any real action. I love that playful image Rumi uses. He compares it to a bird with useless decorative wings.
It's such a vivid way to highlight the need to develop the wings of intellect and hope that allow us to truly soar.
So it's about action informed by reflection, fueled by a deeper kind of hope, not just wishful thinking.
Exactly. And Dr. Larijani suggests that developing these wings is a continuous process. We're always refining our understanding, always shedding old layers that no longer serve us.
This is fascinating. But before we dive deeper, I want to remind you that this deep dive is based on translated conversations with Iranian philosophers, Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani. And as with any translation, some nuances may be lost. We apologize for any discrepancies. Now let's get back to Rumi.
He was truly a master of using vivid imagery to convey profound truths.
And speaking of vivid imagery, Rumi uses some really striking metaphors to describe the human condition. For instance, he talks about the ego as this kind of shadow self that can keep us trapped in a cycle of suffering.
Yes, and he also uses the image of a prison to describe the limitations that we create for ourselves through our thoughts, beliefs, and attachments.
It's like we're building our own cages, bar by bar, with each limiting belief we cling to.
Exactly. And Rumi believed that the key to breaking free from these prisons is to cultivate a deep awareness of our true nature.
Our true nature. What did he mean by that?
He believed that at our core, we are all connected to a divine source, a source of love, wisdom, and infinite potential.
So it's about recognizing that we are so much more than our limited ego selves.
Precisely. And Rumi believed that when we tap into this deeper awareness, we unlock a whole new level of freedom and possibility.
But how do we actually tap into that deeper awareness? It sounds almost too good to be true.
Rumi offered a number of practices to help us cultivate this awareness, including meditation, contemplation, and the remembrance of God. He also emphasized the importance of cultivating love and compassion for ourselves and others.
So it's not just about intellectual understanding, but about embodying these principles in our daily lives.
Exactly. And Dr. Dinani points out that this is a lifelong journey, a process of constant learning and growth.
It's not about achieving some kind of perfect state of enlightenment, but about continually striving to live in alignment with our true nature.
And Dr. Larijani reminds us that this journey is not always easy. There will be challenges, setbacks, and moments when we fall short.
But even those challenges can be seen as opportunities for growth, right?
Absolutely. Rumi believed that every experience, even the painful ones, has the potential to teach us something valuable.
It's about finding the meaning in those moments, the growth that emerges from the struggle.
He uses this powerful image. A seed needs the pressure of the soil to break open and sprout. In the same way, we often need those difficult experiences to push us beyond our comfort zones, to help us blossom into our full potential.
That's a beautiful analogy. But let's be honest, it's hard to see those lessons when we're in the midst of pain.
It is. And that's where Rumi's teachings on compassion and forgiveness become so crucial.
So it's not about pretending everything's fine, but about finding a way to hold those difficult emotions with kindness and understanding.
Dr. Dinani reminds us that forgiveness is not about condoning harmful actions, but about releasing the grip that anger and resentment have on us.
It's about choosing peace over the poison of holding on to grudges.
And Dr. Larijani adds that practicing forgiveness doesn't mean we forget what happened. It's about transforming those experiences into opportunities for growth and healing.
So it's about looking at those difficult moments with new eyes, seeing the lessons that might not have been apparent before.
And it makes me think about Rumi's emphasis on love. He believed that love was not just a feeling, but a transformative force that could heal those wounds and connect us to something bigger than ourselves.
Okay, but what did he mean by love? Was it just romantic love? Or was it...
Something much deeper.
Hmm.
Dr. Dinani explains that for Rumi, love was the very essence of existence. You know, the force that binds everything together, the energy that flows through all of creation.
Wow, that's a powerful way to think about love. Not just a fleeting emotion, but the very fabric of reality. But how do we access that kind of love in our everyday lives?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And Dr. Lariani points out that accessing this love isn't always easy. It requires patience, forgiveness, and a willingness to see beyond the surface. It means choosing to see the good in others, even when they're being difficult, remembering that everyone is on their own journey with their own unique struggles.
It sounds like a radical shift in perspective, a deliberate choice to approach the world with love as our guiding principle. Did Dr. Dinani or Dr. Lorjani share any examples of how Rumi embodied this kind of love in his own life?
Dr. Dinani does. He brought up Rumi's deep friendship with Shams of Tabriz. Their connection was so profound, really transformative for Rumi, but it was also marked by, challenges and misunderstandings. When Shams mysteriously disappeared, Rumi was devastated, but he eventually transformed his grief into this wellspring of creativity and spiritual insight.
That's such a powerful example of how even the most painful experiences can be alchemized into something beautiful and transformative when we approach them with love.
Absolutely. And it really highlights the point that love isn't always about feeling good. It's about choosing to see the divine spark in every being, even when it's hidden beneath layers of pain, anger, or confusion.
So it's about holding space for the complexity of human experience, recognizing that we're all flawed and imperfect beings, but that beneath those imperfections lies a radiant core of love and light.
Exactly. And Dr. Dinani shares this incredibly poignant Rumi quote that speaks to this. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it.
I love that quote. It suggests that love isn't something we need to search for outside ourselves. It's already present within us. We just need to dismantle the walls we've built that prevent us from experiencing it fully.
Precisely. And those walls are often built from fear, insecurity, past hurts. It's the ego's way of trying to keep us safe, but it ends up isolating us, cutting us off from experiencing true connection and intimacy.
It's like we're trapped in our own fortresses, too afraid to let anyone in, even though deep down we're yearning for that connection.
And Dr. Larijani emphasizes that dismantling these walls is a process, not a one-time event. It takes time, patience, and a willingness to confront those shadow parts of ourselves that we'd rather keep hidden.
It's like we're peeling back layers of an onion, revealing more and more of our true selves as we go.
And Dr. Dinani suggests that this process can be both exhilarating and terrifying.
I can see that. It's exciting to discover who we truly are beneath all those layers of conditioning. But it can also be scary to face those parts of ourselves that we've been trying to hide.
Exactly. It requires us to surrender to the unknown, to let go of control, and to trust that something bigger than ourselves is guiding us.
It's like taking a leap of faith, trusting that we'll land safely even though we can't see the ground below.
Such a perfect analogy. And Dr. Larijani points out that this surrender isn't about becoming passive or weak. It's about recognizing that we're not in control of everything, and that sometimes the best course of action is to simply let go and allow life to unfold as it's meant to.
It's about surrendering to the flow of life, trusting that we're exactly where we need to be in each moment. But that doesn't mean we're passive participants, right? We still have a role to play, choices to make, actions to take.
You're exactly right. Rumi believed that when we surrender to a higher power, those actions are guided by wisdom, intuition, and love. It's like we're aligning ourselves with the will of the universe, allowing that divine energy to flow through us and guide our steps.
That makes sense. So it's not about giving up our agency, but about choosing to act in alignment with something larger than ourselves. But how do we know what actions to take? How do we discern the will of the universe from the whims of our own ego?
That's where the practices of self-reflection and discernment come in. Rumi really emphasized the importance of cultivating a deep inner awareness, of learning to listen to the whispers of our hearts. He believed that within each of us resides a divine spark, a source of wisdom and guidance that we can access through practices like meditation, contemplation, and prayer.
So it's about learning to tune into our own inner compass, to trust that still, small voice within that speaks to us of truth and authenticity. But that can be challenging in a world filled with so much noise and distraction, right?
Absolutely. And that's why Rumi emphasized the importance of creating space for silence and solitude. He believed that by quieting the chatter of the mind, we create the space for that inner wisdom to emerge.
It's like we're clearing the static on a radio station, allowing the signal to come through more clearly.
Exactly. And Dr. Larijani shares this beautiful Rumi quote that speaks to this. Silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation.
That's so profound. It suggests that language, even the most eloquent poetry, can only point us towards the truth. It's in the silence, in the stillness, that we truly experience it.
And Dr. Dhanani adds that this practice of silence is not just about finding a quiet place to sit and meditate. It's about cultivating an inner stillness that we can access anywhere, anytime. It's about learning to pause amidst the busyness of life, to take a deep breath, and to reconnect with that sense of peace and presence that resides within.
So it's about bringing that quality of mindfulness into our everyday lives, finding moments of stillness even in the midst of chaos. But how do we actually do that? It sounds challenging, especially in our fast-paced, hyper-connected world.
It does take practice and commitment, but Dr. Larijani suggests that even small moments of silence can have a profound impact. He encourages us to find simple ways to incorporate silence into our daily routines. Maybe it's taking a few minutes each morning to sit in quiet contemplation, or listening to a piece of calming music during our commute, or simply taking a few conscious breaths before responding to a stressful email.
It's about finding those small pockets of stillness throughout the day that allow us to reconnect with ourselves and to access that deeper wisdom that resides within.
Exactly. And Dr. Dhanani points out that as we cultivate this practice of silence, we naturally become more attuned to the needs of our hearts, we begin to understand our own desires, fears, and motivations more clearly, and we become more compassionate and understanding towards ourselves and others.
It's like we're developing a more intimate relationship with ourselves, learning to listen to the whispers of our souls with greater clarity and compassion.
Beautifully said. And as we cultivate this inner awareness, we naturally begin to make choices that are more aligned with our true nature.
It's like we're shedding the layers of conditioning and societal expectations that have kept us from living authentically.
Exactly. And Dr. Larijani shares this inspiring Rumi quote. Don't be satisfied with stories, how things have gone with others. Unfold your own myth.
I love that. It's a reminder that we're each here to write our own unique story, to express our own unique gifts and talents.
And Rumi believed that this unfolding of our own myth requires us to step outside our comfort zones, to take risks, to embrace the unknown.
It's about living a life that's true to ourselves, even if it means going against the grain, challenging the status quo, and forging our own path.
And Dr. Danny points out that this path isn't always easy. There will be obstacles, challenges, and moments of doubt.
But it's in those moments that our courage is truly tested, right? It's about finding the strength to keep moving forward, even when we're unsure of the way.
Exactly. And Dr. Larijani reminds us that we don't have to do it alone. We have each other, we have Rumi's teachings, and we have that divine spark within us that is always guiding us towards our highest good.
It's a beautiful reminder that we're all in this together, supporting each other on this journey of awakening and transformation.
Precisely. And Dr. Larijani adds that even in the midst of our everyday lives, we can cultivate that sense of presence, of openness, of awareness, that allows us to experience the sacred in the ordinary.
It's like bringing that sense of reverence, that sense of wonder into every moment.
Yeah.
But how do we do that when we're faced with, like, traffic jams, deadlines, and piles of laundry? How do we find that sacred spark in the midst of the mundane?
Well, Dr. Dhanani offers a beautiful analogy. Imagine walking through a forest and noticing the intricate details of each leaf, the play of light and shadow, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. It's about slowing down, paying attention, appreciating the beauty that's all around us.
It's like shifting our focus from, the to-do list to the present moment, allowing ourselves to be fully immersed in the richness of experience.
Exactly. And Dr. Larijani suggests that when we approach life with that kind of awareness, we begin to see the divine in everything, in every interaction, every experience. It's like recognizing that the whole world is a love letter from the beloved.
That's such a beautiful image. It makes me think about Rumi's poetry, which is often filled with such passionate expressions of love and longing for the divine.
Yes. And Dr. Dinani points out that for Rumi, love wasn't just a romantic ideal, it was a transformative force, a path to spiritual awakening.
So it's not just about feeling good or having butterflies in your stomach. It's about experiencing a love that transcends the personal and connects us to something so much greater than ourselves.
Exactly. And Dr. Larijani reminds us that Rumi's teachings aren't just about intellectual understanding, they're about embodiment. It's about, putting those teachings into practice, living them out in our daily lives.
So it's not enough to just read Rumi's poetry and admire his beautiful words. We have to actually integrate those teachings into our thoughts, words, and actions.
Exactly. And Dr. Dinani adds that this is an ongoing process, a lifelong journey of learning, growing, and becoming. It's about constantly striving to align our thoughts, words, and actions with those principles of love, compassion, and wisdom.
It sounds like a beautiful but challenging path. What advice would Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani offer to those of us who are just beginning to explore Rumi's teachings?
Well, they emphasize the importance of patience and self-compassion. They remind us that there's no need to rush or to strive for some kind of perfect state of enlightenment. It's about taking small steps each day, being kind to ourselves when we stumble, and celebrating even the smallest victories.
That's such an important reminder. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of spiritual perfection. But Rumi's teachings are ultimately about embracing our humanness, with all its flaws and imperfections.
Absolutely. And Dr. Larijani shares this beautiful Rumi quote that speaks to this. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there.
That quote always resonates with me. It reminds me that we don't have to be perfect to experience spiritual connection and love. It's about letting go of judgment, both of ourselves and others, and meeting each other in that space of open-hearted acceptance.
Beautifully said. And Dr. Dinani adds that one of the most powerful ways to cultivate this open-hearted acceptance is through the practice of gratitude.
Gratitude. How did that connect to Rumi's teachings?
Well, Dr. Larijani explains that when we focus on what we're grateful for, we shift our attention away from lack and scarcity and towards abundance and blessings. It's a practice that helps us cultivate joy, contentment, and a deeper appreciation for the gifts that life has to offer.
It's like we're training our minds to see the good, to appreciate the beauty that's often hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. And Dr. Dinani points out that Rumi himself was a master of gratitude. His poetry is filled with expressions of awe and wonder at the beauty of creation, the power of love, and the miracle of human existence.
So it's not just about saying thank you for the good things in our lives, but about cultivating a deep appreciation for the very gift of life itself.
Beautifully said. And Dr. Larijani adds that when we live from a place of gratitude, we naturally begin to radiate that energy outwards. We become more generous, more compassionate, and more loving toward ourselves and others.
It's like gratitude becomes a ripple effect, spreading outwards and touching the lives of everyone around us.
Exactly. And as we conclude this deep dive into Rumi's wisdom, let's carry his words with us. Let them guide our steps. Let them inspire us to live lives full of love, meaning, and joy.
And remember, as Rumi himself said, you were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life? Let's spread our wings and soar.